the U.S. Embassy for making this program possible. And I want to say hello to our binational centers across the Argentina because they're seeing us right now. And thank you to you, Camilo. He's going to talk about innovation culture. He's the chief operating of Jinso Labs. So thank you, and I leave you with Camilo Sanchez.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you all. It's my pleasure, and I'm really excited to talk with you because innovation and the US are two things that I deeply love, and I think this is going to be a wonderful time for us to talk about some of the core highlights I've learned as being an EdTech entrepreneur in the States, and then also to really have an honest discussion about how we can all innovate more together and how this can impact each other. As such, let me go ahead and share my screen. I hope you can see it now and walk you through a little bit about who I am and the main points I want us to cover in this talk. And then at the end, we'll have a nice Q&A. As I was mentioned so kindly in the introduction, my name is Camilo Sanchez. I am the COO and one of the co-founders of Jinso Labs. Jinso Labs is an American AI company that focuses on improving outcomes in education so that students learn faster, teachers have more tools, and at the end of the day, the outcomes institutions are producing increase as many fold as possible. And as part of this company, we've spent a lot of time figuring out how do we innovate? How do you operate on a scale and on a sophistication that still allows for new technologies to emerge, and also at the same time let people feel happy and content. And as a result, I put some of our thoughts and findings into this document, and I framed it in the language of the U.S.'s Freedom 250 celebration. After all, in a couple of days, we're celebrating probably one of the most historic events of the past 500 years, which is the founding of America. And so today, we're going to start off by doing a warm welcome. And then I want to talk to you about what is the core technology that I think America invented that allows for innovation to happen repeatedly and consistently in both American companies and abroad the world. We're going to find out that that innovation is a particular mindset and that there are 8, let's say, habits of minds that are pretty unique to the American story. Of course, they exist in many innovative places, but they definitely embody a sort of American ethos that people can adapt to. And then we're going to look at the global impact of this and see, hey, not only is this a mindset that exists in America, but it's really been exported. We see it occurring by people who come to the US, immigrants that help innovate in their own right, and also people across the world, and in Argentina especially, that use some of these habits of mind and create incredible insights. And towards the end, I'll challenge you guys to see how you guys can innovate on your own. Uh, yeah. But that being said, let me start off by just really wishing America a happy birthday. I mean, I know this series is part of US Week and it's been organized by the US Embassy. So I'm very proud to be part of this and to help our dear friends with the binational centers. As I was mentioning earlier, Jinso, we are an American AI company, but we actually got our start with the binational center. So we operate with binational centers across South America, the Caribbean, and Central America. And one of the reasons we did that when we were starting up is because the binational centers are such an innovative institution. They are not only the, let's say, outpost of American, let's say, language, American ideas, and American books, but they innovate on the daily. And I really want to give a special shout out to Ikana and some of our partners like Asikana, Arikana, and these other institutions that go out every day and figure out how do they make education better. And that's deeply at the heart of what makes an institution innovative, is the fact that they do it. They go out, they do it, and they make it happen. Um, and perhaps we can start exploring how the binationals do this and how America does this writ large by asking the question, what is this core innovation technology that America came up with? And, let me share a little bit about my background so you get a sense of where I'm pulling these ideas from. But before working at Jinso, I worked in multiple educational technology companies, and I also studied at Harvard. So at Harvard, I went and I studied physics. That's actually where I met some of our founders, including Jay Ligapalan, our CEO, and easily one of the most innovative people I've ever met. And Jay, he had this deep curiosity and desire about him. He's very intense. And one of the things that he always would ask is like, oh, actually, how can I improve that? Like, what can I do here? And he believed that he could. And as some of you who've met us before, you might have heard the story, but Jay, when he was at Harvard, and myself, we both bonded over the fact that we had to learn a foreign language. In my case, I learned Spanish as a second language, even though I was born in Colombia. When I moved to the US, I was growing up speaking only English, and my mom, as some of you may have heard, was very angry at this. So when I was like 7, she told me that if I don't learn Spanish, she would stop feeding me, and that gave me a lot of motivation to learn. And thankfully, I had my cousins, my brothers, my uncles, and herself to help me practice and learn Spanish. So I had inversion that gave me a great gift in life. But in the case of Jay, he had to learn a second language like Korean because he wanted to marry the love of his life, his fiance, or I guess his girlfriend at the time. And in order to marry her, he needed to speak her language, which was Korean. And his mother-in-law said that if he didn't learn Korean, they couldn't get married. So Jay tried everything. He went uh, to classes, he read books, and he didn't get very far. And so he said, you know what, I'm going to go to Korea and learn Korean there. And it was while he was in Korea, he was also studying AI at Harvard, that it really clicked for him that there must be a better way to do this and that he could make that better way happen by using AI and, let's say, tutoring experiences to give students a tip of immersion that can only happen. And so that goes to the question of why did Jay have that thought and what was in his mindset that led him to do this? And if we go into the American ethos for a bit, we can talk about some examples of other innovators like Jay that have done incredible things. Whether it's the lightning rod with Benjamin Franklin in 1752, you have the telegraph, you have the moon landing, the internet, the plane, the transistor, all of these things are incredible revolutions in technology that required a sort of vision and ethos that wasn't happening everywhere else. And it's fascinating because it's not like the technology that enabled these inventions didn't exist across the world. I mean, I always like to think about Benjamin Franklin and the lightning rod because literally everywhere on the planet there was lightning, and it was a major cause of concern. It burnt down lots of places, but only Benjamin Franklin was kooky enough to put a kite and some metal in the sky and see what would happen. And similarly with things like the assembly line, it's not like Henry Ford had a huge geographical advantage. The idea of building things in manufacturing was invented in England, but it was in his case that he saw how to put two together. Or even the Wright brothers, in their case, it was incredible because they're not only the inventors of flight, but their background had nothing to do with planes. In fact, they were primarily bicycle repairmen, and they thought, oh, I think I could do this, and they did it. And so based off of these different innovations, we also see that a lot of American ideas turn into giant companies, and that this ethos that generates ideas not only starts with the individual, but then they can scale it to do things like create Ford or Microsoft, Nvidia, Intel, IBM. And later on, we'll see that these different companies, they embody the ethos we're going to talk about, but they don't necessarily stay with Americans. In fact, a lot of these companies we're going to see were founded by immigrants that adopted this ethos and used let's say, the mentality and the opportunities to develop these giant innovative spaces. And so, in short, not to belabor the point, I believe that one of the core hearts of American innovation and the thing that changed the world and will change your life if you believe it is that you, like not someone else, but you specifically, and maybe you're not an expert, you don't have the permission, but you can actually do the impossible. Like you can be crazy enough to put a man on the moon, or you can say, hey, maybe I'm going to change education or I'm going to do this and believe it and execute on it with a firm and reckless abandon. I mean, my grandma, she had a funny way of capturing this, but she said, Camilo, you can always really tell who an American is in the world because they are so confident they can do anything. And she would say, Camilo, in Colombia, en Bogotá, uno sabe, caminando, uno puede distinguir el gringo. It's like you can see that guy and you can just tell he's an American because he's going to do something that to a local seems atrevido. It seems like perhaps not in line with what is expected, and he's going to do it confidently and loudly and trustingly. And he might lose. A lot of times, it doesn't go that well, but he'll try it. And I think this belief, coupled with a few other habits of mind, embody that engine behind American innovation, which is this desire of taking risks, regardless of the likelihood of you yourself being the right person to, and then iterating on those risks and failures to learn quickly. And in here, I'm going to argue that this isn't unique to just American companies, but it's pretty deeply built into the story of the country and at least the way they educate their people. So when I was young, I remember learning about the American history throughout high school and elementary school and realizing that the through line through all of it, at least this is what they put in the history books, was that America consistently did what was impossible until it wasn't. And they would start this history and this ethos with the very beginning when people arrived in the US and they said, hey, of course, there were the Native American populations. But when we had the Pilgrims arrive, one of the first things that they did was they wrote their own rules. They said, we have no governing authority. They were lost in the woods, but they said, we're going to make a compact and each one of us is going to make something new. And then this went even further when you have the, let's say, founding era, and you see the American population put out this radical idea of a republic where everyone is made equal, and that on top of that, we're going to make institutions that can foment that. And if you look between 1776 and 1787, you'll see some kind of fascinating things. Like, for example, the fact that the first constitution of the US failed pretty miserably. And they said, okay, try one didn't work, so we're going to try again. And throughout the history, as you get into more of the modern era, you see this continuing. So whether it's the telegraph with uh, excuse me, more, or the telephone very thereafter with Alexander Graham Bell, you see this sort of idea of, okay, there's something that's never existed, but I'm pretty sure I can do it and I'm going to do it. And if we look in the modern era, the list of American inventions continue, in my mind, to be pretty famous. We have the flying machines, we have the beautiful planes, we have the digital age. We also have things that, right now are making a whole lot of difference, like cell phones that came out in 2007. I mean, before that, well, cell phones didn't come out there, but the iPhone, the smartphone came out there that has changed people's lives. And nowadays, you see American institutions doing incredible things, whether it's vaccine development, like getting us out of COVID in conjunction with many others, and you know, powering the AI revolution. And what's also amazing when we think about how this has impacted the world is the sort of size of this impact. And here are just some numbers that I think really contribute to this. Number one is that if you look at the US, we actually lead the world in Nobel Prizes, which is fascinating considering that we're not a very large part of the world, and the Nobel Prize is a European award made for European, let's say, institutions. And then number two is the amount of money that the US and now China actually invest into research and development, into taking these bets, which right now is over $1 trillion, which is an incredible amount of capital. And then also, and this is kind of a fascinating bit that we'll get into, the fact that of American companies, if you look at the ones that are multi-billion-dollar startups, over half of them were actually founded by immigrants. So they were not founded by Americans. And if we're thinking about some of the more interesting folks that exist, I wanted to call out one of my personal heroes, which is Guillermo Rauch. He is actually an Argentinian immigrant who I believe went to the US, and he made one of the softwares called Vercel that now is worth billions of dollars and is the thing that powers a large part of the Jinso ecosystem. And so overall, we get a sense of this idea that the American mindset of you can do the impossible has been a through line in the history of the country. And you can see that it has powered a lot of companies that drive a lot of economic growth. And fascinatingly, it's not even limited to a specific group of people or groups of people, but rather it is something that people who decide to adopt it can do it. And by the end of this, I hope to challenge y'all in saying you too can actually implement this type of mentality. And who knows? I mean, perhaps one of you guys will be the next great innovator and bring about the billion-dollar company or the change that you want to see. And to highlight sort of the scale of this, I wanted to quickly shout out some of the famous immigrants to the US that actually made world-changing alterations, and that I don't know if people recognize their impact all the time. So I always like to start with one of my personal heroes, Nikola Tesla. So Nikola Tesla famously was from Serbia, and he was way ahead of his time. I mean, truly a legend. And he helped develop the electrical power that you're seeing throughout your grid, whether you're connecting in Argentina or in the US. But anytime you have a non-direct current, you can thank Nikola Tesla. And he went to the US to develop it. Like he could have maybe done it in Serbia, but it was something about going to the US and finding the right partners with the right mindset that make it happen. If you talked on the telephone, you can thank our great immigrant from Scotland, Alexander Graham Bell, who developed the telephone and then also made a great telephone company, which if you guys know of AT&T or American Telegraph and Telephone. We have, of course, Einstein, who is famously German, but also came to the US and there developed a lot of great work. And in more modern times, we can also shout out some great folks like Guillermo Rauch from Argentina. We have Sundar Pichai, who is from India, but he now leads Google. And even perhaps, I believe, maybe one of the most famous folks on the planet, Elon Musk, who famously moved from South Africa and built a lot of companies. We have Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, but all these folks came from around the world. They came to the US and were able to develop something huge. So, enough maybe context. And in the time we have before we go to open answers and questions, I'd love to share with you sort of the 8 core pillars of this mindset that I think are pretty actionable. And the 8 pillars are effectively derived from owning the result and being able to risk it. So the first one that I see is very common to the American way of doing things compared to say, we love our friends in Europe, but some of the European ways of doing things is you do it. So in America's mindset, you oftentimes the outcome is more important than the process. And you can see this actually happening right now with AI. So it's perhaps controversial, but you'll notice that if you look at the European regulatory landscape, when AI came on the scene, the first thing the Europeans said in general was, oh, this is really powerful. We need to figure out how to do this safely and put a lot of guardrails. So they focus on the process. In America, they didn't necessarily do that. Okay, let's see. I'm getting a message. Hey, Camilo, everything's great. Due to some technical issues, we'll end the Zoom and the live stream after your presentation. Okay, perfect. Anyway, sorry about that. I was just getting a message, but we were saying outcomes over process. So in the AI example, you can see even right now in the most innovative field, some cultures and some regulatory cycles are more focused on limiting the process rather than driving the outcome. And that is a very different focus and it will sort of help you see that world. So if the outcome is just get the result, you're going to focus on whatever it takes to get that result rather than doing it the right way. This leads to a type of aggressiveness. The second one that is oftentimes, in my mind, associated with American innovation is this idea of like you own it. That's to say, as famously, I think it was Harry Truman said, the buck stops with you, which is to say you don't try to shirk from the responsibility. You are responsible for the outcome and you own the result. So if you fail, and that's fine, but you're not going to shirk. You're going to say, oh, it was a problem. I couldn't do it because of X, Y, Z reasons. I know I failed. I need to change and I'm going to reform myself in order to make that happen. Number three we have is what we call like this risk taker mentality. And perhaps you can see this in some of America's literature, but generally speaking, I think of Death of a Salesman, Americans are willing to take pretty big bets, and a lot of the times they fail miserably, but they're willing to take that chance because even if there's a slight shiver of success, they're crazy enough to believe that they could make it big. And that's, in some parts, the heart of the American dream is like you can come here, you can do the right risks, and then you can get great. And another point is that this idea that you have to learn. You have to learn from your failures, and you should not be ashamed to fail and fail quickly for the sake of succeeding faster. Tomorrow, I believe, is George Washington's birthday. I don't know if it's his birthday, but I know tomorrow and July 3rd is a very important day for George Washington because he, as the founder of this country, is unique and oftentimes seen as a hero. But people oftentimes forget that throughout a lot of his life, he was viewed as a miserable failure because at 20 years old, he almost single-handedly started the most disastrous war in North America. He started the French and Indian War, or sometimes known as, I believe, the 7 Years' War, by losing a massive attack and getting a lot of his men killed. And he was ridiculed for years because he was a failure. He was not doing particularly great in his career, but he never really gave up. And people oftentimes, when they talk of George Washington's, they talk about his perseverance. When he was losing, he kept going. And especially one of the things that made him unique was his ability to reflect and to learn from tactical defeats. And this you can strategically, let's say, generalize and say that one of the core parts of American culture is that failure doesn't stick with you. It's a place where you can learn. And so oftentimes people who failed, they'll get up, they'll try again. And if you have a good idea, you can execute on it even if you failed 10,000 times. Or as Thomas Edison said, I didn't fail 10,000 times in making a light bulb. I just found 10,000 ways not to do it. The fifth point of this mindset that I always highlight is this idea of solving a real need, which is to say that oftentimes Americans are viewed as pragmatic because of their desire to be not super philosophical, but to solve something really practical and say, okay, I'm going to solve this specific issue. And they'll obsess over it. So you'll see a lot of the most interesting products that have come out of the US are built by founders that were obsessive and, really couldn't stop but help themselves but work on it, even if the financial reward wasn't obvious. You can look at the Wright brothers and they would spend hours and hours experimenting and doing things, even though there was not really a great way at the time to make money from their invention. And even after they came up with space flight, with plane flight, it's not that clear that it was super financially lucrative. And then, getting to the last two, I'll highlight this idea of sharing your ideas. The US is a deeply collaborative culture, and oftentimes Americans are not shy about sharing what they think pretty openly. They'll say to you, yeah, this is my idea, this is what I'm gonna do. They'll talk about it nonstop. Whereas in other frameworks, that can be frowned upon. So, for example, and oftentimes in lower trust societies, people will be very guarded about their ideas. They don't want to share people because they think they might end up being stolen or perhaps taken advantage of. But in the American mindset, oftentimes the sense is that no, share your ideas, put it out there, test it. And if someone steals your idea, at the end of the day, the really hard part is not coming up with an idea. Those are cheap. What's hard is executing well on the idea. And so going back to the Wright brothers, the idea of let's fly, that's fine. What's really hard is actually flying. And the last one that I'll put out there is this idea of just win it, which is this sense that is really emphasized, especially in American sports culture, of you leave it all on the field. Like you win the game, you do not stop until the old lady or the fat lady sings, and even then, you do your best showing. So you won't phone it in, even if it's a small thing, because it's what you love, it's what you're proud of doing. And this mindset tends to also be coupled with what I am stealing straight up from Netflix, but which I thought was a great framing, a culture of freedom plus responsibility. So oftentimes you'll see companies or even as an ecosystem, people will take this mindset and then they'll enjoy the freedom and accept the responsibility that comes with that freedom, which is to say that if you want to innovate at scale, and what a lot of American institutions will do is they'll focus on giving their employees first, making sure there's a lot of high talent density, so keeping them together. Two, giving really honest feedback. And three, providing people with enough context to make decisions without exactly telling them what to do. And so the idea there is effectively like take your mindset, go into your environment and take responsibility for your decisions and let your people around you make mistakes, fail, but let them learn from it and keep doing it. And at the end of the day, the compounding returns of having this type of mindset in an institution with lots of high quality people leads to results that are not only at the individual level, but at the company level. I know we're coming up a little close on time, so let me go ahead and uh, skip a little bit, but we'll go into some examples of innovations and this mindset at work that were not particularly let's say sexy, like the smartphone or things like that, but that are transformative and shows that this is applying innovation not only in tech but across the world. And my favorite example of this is what they call the most valuable box in history. So if you guys have ever had anything shipped by boat or even by bus, you might have noticed that there is a standard container. And this was invented by a wonderful man named Malcolm McLean that noticed that actually one of the biggest problems in his day to day was that he had to load and unload trucks, and it was done by hand with crates, and all the crates were pretty uneven. And he thought to himself, wouldn't it be nice if we put all this into one box and then we can move it up and down? Um, and he built the prototypes, from what I understand, and actually was able to design this initial idea. Nowadays, this box that he designed to allow for transportation, the steel cargo containers, they've been regulated. So if you look at the UN, they have a standard that defines what is the shipping container. But that really simple idea of, oh, there's a problem I see. The problem is that this is annoying. I can fix it. Let me fix it. And then, yeah, I'll put it out there. So, yeah, this is the box I built. Let's do it. Radically transform the world. And I think is probably responsible for more, let's say, efficiency gains than anyone else. Not to mention, at least anyone else in the shipping industry firsthand. And not to mention the amount of, let's say, cheap and easy goods it's allowed you to get. So if you have like, I guess, Mercado Libre or Amazon in the US, you can probably thank Malcolm McLean for daring to say, yeah, let's do this in a better way. Um, and in the last few minutes, I'll say that currently the company that uh, I co-founded and we're running, Jinso, is really striving to innovate in this way. So in our own side, we really focus on solving real problems. And for us, it's how do we improve student learning outcomes and making sure that we can ship the products quickly and rapidly. And we really own it. Like I'm sure the binational center folks can probably vouch for you, but we try to be present, and when we make mistakes, we try to own our mistakes so that we can fix them and give a result that's worthy of it. And if it's not, then we say, okay, we failed. Let's learn and see how we can do again. Um, and that's how we're trying to build up this platform that's going to be the engine and already is the thing that's powering learning outcomes in English and workforce development across the region. Uh, and so when you put it all together, if you get this innovative mindset, you put it in the right, let's say, cultural setting where you have people that are willing to all collaborate together and you find a problem worth solving, you're going to get companies that change the world. And In fact, I'm willing to venture that if you look across the world at some of the most innovative ecosystems that exist, whether they're occurring in great companies in the Silicon Valley or some of the companies in Argentina and Brazil, you'll find a pretty similar sense of innovation where people there will be deeply motivated, they'll be deeply what they call having extreme ownership, and they'll be obsessed with the problem. And so, in the last minute or two, I would love to encourage you guys to try to see how you can do this in your own life. Like, how do you run this loop and try to innovate even small things, whether it's, how do I get my dishes cleaned in a better way, or how do I improve something at my job? Like, choose a problem that you want to solve that's annoying to you and that you're willing to do for free. And that's to say that the problem motivates you enough to do it. And build some prototypes, like prototype it fast, validate it, put that prototype in front of people and see if it's working. And if it's not, that's fine. Figure out what doesn't work about it, iterate again and try again, and then repeat until you find something that's great and that you're proud of, and then put it out in the world and innovate. Um, and so as we close out, I always would like to remind folks that, it's very much the case that things only seem impossible until you do it. Within my grandpa's lifespan, he went from not having running water or electricity in his house to seeing a man be put on the moon. And after that, he saw AI emerge. And so those things would have been impossible to imagine, but they were able to be done. And I'm sure that the next great round of innovation is there. And I would love for it to come out of Argentina and for folks to do it together. Yeah, and that being said, I'd also like to wrap up by really thanking ICANA and all the other binational centers across Argentina, as well as the US Embassy for helping us have this event, and really wishing America a happy 250th birthday. Uh, thank you very much. And with that, I think we are
Thank you.
out of time.
Thank you so much, Camilo. We hear you loud and clear. Don't worry, we are here. And thank you so much, guys. You know that these sessions have two parts, okay? Now we're going to close. We're going to say goodbye to Camilo. Bye, Camilo. See you later.
You guys, bye.
And now we're going to have a super interesting roundtable with Pablo Florentin, okay? So thank you. Bye-bye.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye.